Fellow Ghanaians, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on Upfront on the Joy News channel. It's Wednesday, the 12th day of July 2023. Feels like a very wet day, has been raining where we find ourselves today, but of course, lots of issues have also been happening in the country. Now, today in Parliament, for instance, there's been lots of conversations in Parliament. First, the minority in Parliament wanted to be marked as absent with permission because they were not in Parliament and that they had gone to solidarize or show solidarity with their colleague, the Member of Parliament for Asin North. Well, the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, says anytime they do not show up in Parliament, anytime they go to court, they would be marked as absent without permission. That led into a lot of discussions here and there, but well, that was the Speaker's ruling, so that's just by way of things happening in Parliament. And still on happenings in Parliament, well, we know that Parliament has actually ordered a probe into a leaked audio in which we're told a senior police officer and one other person planning a scheme against IGP Dr. George Akuffo-Dampare. Well, Parliament is going to be investigating that. I'm sure there are some of you who may have, listened to the leaked audio. Well, Parliament says they would look into it, so would wait for Parliament's verdict. But also in Parliament, the law on the production of cannabis, well, that particular section that was struck out by the Supreme Court has been debated and passed in Parliament. Also today, the governing New Patriotic Party, now the vetting committee, submitted its report, and all 10 flag bearer aspirants have passed and would go on and campaign and wait for the party's Superdelegates Conference on the 26th of August 2023. Already there are some conversations about some alliance. We'll see what happens in the NPP. My name is Winston Amoah. But tonight our focus is on inflation. Because by November 2022, Ghana's rate of inflation at 50%. Lots of us were concerned because at the time, we only had a rising, a depreciating Ghana cedi coupled with the high rate of inflation. It means a lot of things had become difficult for many of us. In fact, we had complained about how the prices of goods and services were rising by the day. In fact, for many of us, we complained and said, the rate of inflation cannot be 50%. But of course, as we do know, it all boils down to the rate. And so your inflation may be different from the national average. And then by December 2022, it had risen to 54%. By January 2023, it had reduced to 53.6%. Then it reduced to 52.8% in February 2023. By March, we had seen a significant reduction to 45.0%, and then in April, 41.2%. So we said, well, this is what we've all been waiting for. We had talked about how at the time, signing on or, having a staff level agreement had even changed things because we had seen some bit of appreciation when it comes to the Ghana cedi compared to the dollar. Well, that trend quickly changed. By April, yes, it had increased to 42.2%. But by April, it still had reduced to 41.2%. Then in May, we saw a reversal of the trend. Because in May, it increased to 42.2%. And in June 2023, 42.5%. What that means is that we've seen a 0.3% increase in the rate of inflation. But of a particular concern to many of you is the food inflation. Today, we're told that in June, we have a food inflation of some 54.2%. Now, that's a 3% increase from the 51% in May 2023. And if you compare that in April 2023, it was 48.7%. You ask the simple question, what is causing the rise in food inflation? After all, we have been implementing loads of policies over the period aimed at ensuring that we are able to produce enough food. Have those programs that we've implemented in the past not yielded the right results? Or as always, there could be other factors affecting us. This evening on Upfront on the Joy News channel with me, Winston Amoah. Our focus is on Ghana's rising food inflation and how we can reverse the trend. When we return after these messages, I'll be introducing my guest to you this evening, and then the conversations will begin. Of Ghana, and we also have Anthony Morrison, who's CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness, both joining us to have a conversation about Ghana's rising inflation, particularly the food inflation, and how we can reverse this trend. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us. We believe that you're doing very well this evening.
Yes, very
great. Thank you. Thank you once again. So let me start off with you, Dr. Charles Nyaba. So, this is a conversation we had in the past. We've talked about, Ghana's rising food inflation. But of course, we were hoping that, by now, having talked about all the challenges we had, January, February, it was not that bad. But then it's been rising since. What's really the problem, Dr. Charles Nyaba?
Thank you. Good evening yourself, and then my good friend from Morrison. I think if you follow food prices in Ghana, you agree with me that what we are seeing now is not abnormal at all. We classify this part of the season as a lean season, where farmers would have depleted their stock to use in producing for the new season. We've also realized that in last year, when the May season started, our cost of production increased from 2,100 Ghana cedis to produce 1 acre of maize, rice to 3,900 Ghana cedis. And that the cost of high production was due to a number of factors. Some were domestic, some were international. At the international level, prices of input went very high. Fertilizers increased from 180 Ghana cedis previous years to almost 400 Ghana cedis. Cost of seeds went high. Government reduced subsidies on inputs, seeds, and fertilizers. Fuel prices went high. So that actually puts cost of production very high. So majority of farmers actually have to reduce their farm sizes. Others have to shift from producing staple foods to tree crops like cashew. So this also impacted on supply of food for last year. So you realize that last year the total quantity of food that actually supply is less than the demand. So we were expecting to actually see what's happening, and we predicted that coming. So around this time of the season is where farmers who would have stored small to actually use for this year's production would have sold everything. So when you go to the market, what you are expecting to see, you are likely not to see that in the market.
Let me bring Farmer Morrison in at this point and get his view also on, what is happening, why we're having to experience, these high rates. Anthony Morrison.
Well, very good evening to your cherished viewers, and good evening to yourself and my good friend Charles. Yes, I perfectly agree with Charles. We made these presentations last year. We made it clear that Ghana was likely to face high inflation in food as a result of certain indicators that we picked up, some of which was alluded to by Charles. In addition to that, as a country, we have failed to make the necessary budgetary allocation or investment for food and food systems in the country. If you realize over the past 12 years, no government has made any budgetary or investment of our GDP more than 1% towards our food production in the country. And you have also realized that population have increased more than 3% ever since. And according to the Malabo and the Maputo Declaration, of which Ghana is a signatory, our expectations were that we will be making no less than 10% of our GDP or budgetary allocation for agriculture. That hasn't been the case over the past 12 years. The only budgetary allocation we've seen slightly gone above 1.1 was when the former NDC government was in power. So I think as a country, we have failed to properly align our indicators properly. Our set out priorities have failed us. We have failed to align to global phenomenon and to take strategies to forestall some of these happenings. For instance, why is it taking government and Ghana so long to have its own fertilizer factory when we have started oil exploration some 10 years ago? Our strategies are not in line with our priorities. For instance, when you look at our national security indicators, of which global national security indicators have continuously to downgrade us. First of all, they look at three key areas. First, policy commitment by governments. Two, national priority areas. And three, alignment of our policies towards national priorities and global phenomenon. So to a large extent, I think that there is more to be done, both in private and public investment for agriculture systems in the country.
Let me just find this one, because I'm just looking at, the CPI for June, and I see vegetables, plantain, and the rate of inflation is 40.8%. Even live animals, meats, and other slaughtered animals is 51.6%. Milk, dairy products, eggs, 56.5%. I mean, vegetables have a rate of inflation of 40%. I mean, at the beginning of the year, we've not had a very bad weather in itself. So, Anthony Morrison, why would we have a 40% inflation when it comes to vegetables, for instance?
Okay, so let me take from vegetables and I'll talk about the livestock as well.
Sure.
So for instance, the vegetables, if you look at it, we argue that a lot of farmers do not necessarily use the organic fertilizers. And at the time where fertilizer prices have shot up, our expectations were that government would have removed the cost on organic fertilizers so that vegetable producers can adopt organic fertilization. That hasn't been the case. So government obviously was looking at the same universal application. Now, just as it was alluded to by Dr. Charles, the cost of production doesn't differ from cereals and grains to vegetables. They all adopt the same agronomic practices. Land clearing that has gone up in terms of plowing and harrowing, the cost of seeds. And let me add that Ghana only produces just about 3 to 4% of its vegetable seeds that we consume. We import more than 95% of all vegetable seeds. So as our cedi depreciates against the dollar or other major currencies, so will be required of us to spend more cedis to buy more dollars or other currencies to be able to procure some of these vegetable seeds. So as a country, we may need to invest into our seed industry. The likes of WACI, West Africa Center for Crop Improvement, SARI of CSR, and the likes have been doing a great job. The only way we can forestall some of these problems is to invest heavily into R&D, research and development. That is the only way we can remain competitive or to be able to engage actively with our competitors. We are chasing the goals because we failed over the past 20 to 30 years to make any meaningful investment into research and development. Go to CSR and see the kind of resources and equipment and gadgets that they are working with at their labs. Does CSR have any of the top labs comparable to any of the European countries to be able to do some of the critical research for growth within the agriculture sector? It's a no. And let me come to the livestock.
Okay.
The cost of transhuman issues, especially in the Acquah sub-region. If you are moving cattle from Ghana to Ivory Coast, cattle from Ghana to Nigeria, it's a little bit cheaper. In fact, I wouldn't say it's a little bit, it's 70% cheaper than when you move cattle from Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali into Ghana. The cost of vaccination of one cattle is about $12. Meanwhile, when you are moving from Ghana to other countries, it's about $3 to $4. In some cases, it's even free.
Okay.
So if we're having problems with our dairy foods, it's also because as a result of the fact that 70% of our dairy foods come from outside the country, the sub-region, majority from Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and other neighboring countries. So if you go to Tulaku, for instance, close to Michel Camp, over 10,000 of goods are brought there on monthly basis, and they are all sold out. Where do we get them from? We get them from Niger and Mali. Those are the Sokoto, Gudari, the West African dwarfs, and the likes. So there is a lot to be done when we're talking about, these days we don't want to be talking on media and stuff like that. People are thinking we are taking advantage, but the issues are real. The issues are eminent, and we need to take the necessary steps to forestall this. Sometimes it's not just good talking about a bad situation, but it's what we have, and you can't keep complaining. Why do we keep lining over 60 to 100 trucks going to Burkina Faso to import when the humidity in Ghana and the salinity of the soil can give us about 7.2 bricks, which is better than anywhere in the world? So we have ourselves to blame for not investing heavily into research and development. For me, that is where we need to start from.
Great. So let me bring in, Dr. Nyaba. Dr. Nyaba, you're looking at, for instance, you're looking at, the rate of inflation, and you're told even fish, local, from the sea, and its rate of inflation is 90.8% year on year, 90.8%. You're looking at garden eggs, 81.2%. I mean, how's that the case, Dr. Nyaba?
Yeah, so as my colleague Farmer Morrison indicated, you see the basis for inflation in the livestock sector. Let me take them one by one. If you take poultry, for instance, poultry farmers depend 70% of their feed from maize and soybeans. And if you look at last year, because of cost of fertilizer and cost of seeds, cost of fuel, which influence cost of plowing, most maize farmers shifted into producing tubers and then leguminous crops. So because of that, majority of poultry farmers have to actually close down, others have to scale down their production. And I think there was a point in time that there were calls from government to actually do something about it. We didn't hear anything. When you take the dairy products, like the cattle and then the goat and the sheep, last year we have to travel to Mamikro in the Afran Plains to go and settle disputes between cattle farmers and crop farmers. That conflict alone led to cattle farmers losing over 1,000 cows around that area. So we have to move them to the cattle ranches that were created by government in the Afran Plain North. But when they got that, most of them actually refused to enter there, and they have to sell out their cattle. Another issue has to do with the Boko Haram insurgents that actually block the movement of vegetables from Burkina Faso, Togo to Ghana. Within the period, you realize that some trucks were actually banned, some drivers killed for trying to bring onions, tomatoes, and other things from Burkina Faso to Ghana. So most of those who were involved in trading these vegetables to Ghana actually stopped. We indicated earlier when the former minister said that we were self-sufficient in vegetable production. We said that we get about 90% of our vegetables from Burkina. So when that happened, and Burkina-based blocked their borders, in fact, tomato prices went very high, pepper prices went very high, the same to garden eggs and the rest of the vegetables. Now, if you come to the middle belt, where we used to depend so much on vegetables like garden eggs, like tomatoes in Adam, all those areas, the farmers have shifted into producing cashew. So it has also impacted the number of farmers who are into vegetable production and the supply in the market. So all that influenced the prices. Now, as we speak, last year government passed a law that actually removed all waivers on agro products. So those who are bringing agro products like fertilizers, like seeds, like tractors, they have to pay full duty and taxes on them. So that has also pushed the price very high. Today, when you go to the market, you cannot even get hybrid seeds to buy because we import them. We produce little hybrid seeds in the market. I've spoken to most importers who have their seeds in the ports. They could not clear because they cannot even afford to pay the duties. So all these are factors. Now, if you also look at the exchange rate differential, it's also impacting on the food that we bring in. You indicated earlier on that around March, April, when the inflation went down a bit. It was because around that period, you realize that our cedi strengthened against all the major currencies. So importing them and bringing them, the price becomes cheaper. But from May till now, the exchange rate, the cedi has depreciated again. So it has also impacted on the price of imported food items. So all these are factors that are impacting on the price that we are seeing. Now, apart from that, I indicated earlier on that this is the hard period for farmers. They have sold everything, there is nothing to put in the market. So we have to continue to depend on the importation. And that's why you see that the local food items, the inflation is a bit lower than that of the imported food items. So this is the time, I agree with Morrison, that investment in the sector is actually limited for the past few years. And this year is even worse.
Okay.
You know, the ministry has removed all subsidies on fertilizers and seeds. And we are still waiting for alternative investment that farmers will get.
Okay.
But as we speak, there is no hope because we haven't had anything that is coming on board for farmers. So if those issues are not addressed, to further escalate cost of production and which will also affect food that will be available for the market in 2024.
Now, talking about, you can see that the prices of, the rate of inflation of, imported things are, higher. Are lower, for instance, are higher than even the local ones. If you look at granules, shelled. Now, that's local. That has a year-on inflation of 125%. Okay, tea bags, which is imported. So you can actually see dog meat, local, has a rate of inflation of 102%. Then palm oil, red oil, local, 98%. Fish, local, 90%. Shea butter, local, 87%. Salt, local, 83%. Herrings, smoked fish, local, 82%. So the reality you see here is that a lot of them are actually local, and this is where level is used for wider engagement. Majority of which are food, and they are local, very, very expensive, and the rate of inflation sometimes over 100%, Charles.
Yeah, so I agree with you on that score. But you see, the farmer is also a rational investor. So if a farmer thinks that if I sell my bag of granite, which I sold last year for 300 Ghana cedis, this year, if I sell it for 300 Ghana cedis, I won't be able to buy a bag of fertilizer, which I would have bought last year. We're going to put the price in a way that we'll be able to also buy the farm inputs in the market. So if you look at cost of other factors of production, which is beyond the control of the farmer, cost of plowing, for instance, last year, which was going for around 150 Ghana cedis, in most places going for 300 Ghana cedis. And it's due to cost of clearance of tractor parts and then the tractor itself from the ports. If you take a fertilizer, for instance, the soil fertilizer we're getting for around 320 Ghana cedis. The same one is going for 400 and 450 Ghana cedis. So if a farmer already has maize or groundnut to sell in the market, you will sell the price at which I would have sold last year. Won't be able to acquire the input to produce this year. When the farmer have no option than to peg the price in a way that when he get the money, he'll be able to buy those inputs. It is the reason why you see groundnut prices, inflation going for over 100%. Now, the factor that we need not to forget is that for groundnut, many farmers were actually moving away from groundnut production because of climate change. If you produce groundnut and you don't get enough weight to uproot it, you are likely to lose everything 100%. There are several examples in different areas in northern Ghana where farmers actually produce granules and they've not taken a single bag from the farm. So because of that, rational farmers and large-scale farmers who are going into farming, which has become a norm in these areas, are not going into granule production because we don't still have harvesters for granules. We have no control over the rainfall pattern. We have no control over how the granule itself is stored and then they're taken to the market. So because of all this, and if you want to do a 50-acre farm, you rather prefer to do either maize, rice, or soybeans, which you have a bit control than that of granules. For the lot of fish and then the other items you are talking about, I think it's the same trend that they are also looking at. If you produce and sell, will you be able to cover your cost of production?
Okay.
Many fish farmers actually scale down their production because they cannot afford the feed. The feed fees is very expensive. I have a number of friends who have to close their fish ponds because they cannot afford the feed. So these are the factors.
Let me bring in, now that we've established the factors, before I bring in Morrison, because we want to look at how we can deal with this. But you are into rice farming, Charles Nyaba. I see here, rice, local, 76.7%. You've been running a lot of campaign. We've been talking about how we should be supporting. We're buying. So how come you're increasing, the prices? At least you have good demand for it.
Yeah, listen, as I said earlier, I said a farmer is just rational like any other human being or any other Ghanaian because we are going to the same market. So if I maintain the price that I sold last year, it means that I cannot be in production because I need to buy inputs. Apart from inputs, I need to also go into consuming other products that I don't produce. Those other food products like dairy products, like Milo, like what have you. I need to also do that. So for me to remain in business and be able to live a meaningful life, I have to push the price to the consumer.
Okay. Farmer Morrison, so you are the CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness. Now, all these things that you've talked about presents business opportunities. These are challenges that presents opportunities for you. Why are you not taking advantage of them? Why is the Chamber not taking advantage and solving all these problems?
Well, Wilson, we have done a lot in terms of trying to promote agricultural investment in Ghana. We continue to travel to all parts of the world with a lot of profiled agricultural investment destinations for Ghana. But just as you already do know, for instance, you mentioned rice. The cost of milling, in Ghana, we do not actually give subsidies to the agricultural sector. For instance, do we have special coupons for the factories to be able to reduce the cost of power? So you spoke about the fact that prices of rice have gone up. If you go to the mill, the prices of power, electricity, over the past few months have gone up almost more than 60 or something %. The cost of fuel have gone up. And so this is also impacting on the factories. And the factories will also have to be in business to be able to continue to mill for farmers. Another issue is the fact that the aflatoxin rate for several of the grains and cereals have also gone up. We did a presentation to the Danish embassy a few months ago, and we realized that Ghana can save no less than 1.7 billion annually on food waste and food losses. These are issues with regards to post-harvest issues. We have also encountered the fact that government itself is failing to actually put in strategies that will promote direct investment from the private sector. For instance, if you take our top trade partners, do we have agriculture trade attaches or agriculture specialists in, let's say, the Chinese embassy or the Washington or Italy or Japan? When investment is coming to the agriculture sector, it first of all goes through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through Ministry of Trade, to Ministry of Agriculture. You tell me how long this channel will take before it gets back to the investor who is waiting to get access to timely information within a day or two to make a decision. So sometimes our structures does not permit us to also promote some critical investment into the industry. Another thing
Yes, go ahead.
Another thing you want to talk about is over the years, access to credit in the country has already is almost non-existent. For instance, we've spoken about GESEL, okay, and we've spoken about the fact that there needs to be certain infrastructures in place for GESEL to function. As we speak, GESEL has not really made the impact. GESEL will say we have invested into rice, but at the same time, the importation of rice in the country has rather escalated. GESEL will say we have invested into poultry. However, our poultry frozen food importation to the country has escalated. So, meaningly, we have limited way to influence investment.
Yes, but I mean, Anthony Morrison, Anthony Morrison, you're joining us, complain. Yes, we know these are the challenges. You are CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness. What I am asking you is, how are you taking advantage? Now, these are challenges and they present opportunities to you. How are you taking advantage of these challenges to solve the problems that we're faced with?
We can only take advantage of these challenges when government machineries, when government incentives for the public sector the private sector to invest. That is the only way. For instance, if I have my funds and I want to invest into the agriculture sector, is government going to make some support? Is going to provide some support? For instance, if I'm to set up about 200 kilometers of the main road, I have to look for funds to make way through that road all the way to my farm. That comes at no less than 200,000 cost to the farmer, which can go directly into productivity. For instance, do we have access to electricity? Will government support extending electricity support to these farms? He will not. You see, there are certain critical things that ought to be prevalent for private sector to see the industry as very lucrative. For instance, we've been talking about the fact that government to put a cap on importation of rice, okay, in order to induce private sector investment. Has government done that? No. We import more than 70% of frozen fish. Has government tried to incentivize the industry by capping importation of frozen fish? No. Government have been pushed several times to cap importation of frozen chicken. Have we been able to do that? No. We have rather seen increases. So these are critical areas and sectors of the economy of the.
But have you also shown? Anthony Morrison, have you also shown that giving the support you can produce?
Of course, we even presented data to the International Trade Center, which is part of the Trade Ministry. Met them, engaged them, presented data that informed the fact that, look, there is a need to reduce trade. You see, another thing we need to look at as a country, and to be sincere with you, our agriculture trade regulatory structures are very weak or almost non-existent. We've spoken about the fact that the rice prices have gone up. Yes, of course. Last year, if you look at it, we did produce quite a lot, especially in the Volta Basin. But what did we see? We saw a lot of them being imported or traded off to Nigeria. Okay, so we need to also find out how structures and regulatory systems are in place to strengthen people's investment. See, these investments are not from on the table. They are taken from the banks, credit. Even if some exist at the banks at all, this investment must go back to pay back for the credits that are obtained from these financial institutions. And you and I know how difficult it is to even access credit for agriculture purposes in Ghana. You go to GRPC. Luckily, GRPC is looking at reviewing some of the investment laws. Those are some of the things that we have pushed for. For the private sector, they will only make investment when they see that the industry is ready with regards to government commitment, and also it's not about the fact that food prices are going up, so you should invest. The fact that food prices are going up doesn't make it necessary or gives it the opportunity for you to invest. For instance, government reviews the tax regime last year, which has affected the importation of critical input in the agriculture sector. As we stand now, we have done press conferences, we have done press releases, government is still adamant. Ask yourself, look at what is happening with buffer stock. Does Ghana as a country have even food reserve? Okay, we are now in minus, right? So these are not things that will encourage the private sector to invest. Government will have to make necessary steps, put in friendly structures that will convince private investors to put money into the sector. But when these things are not in there, there is nothing the private sector can do.
I see. Let me bring in Dr. Charles Nyaba. So, I mean, on your own, Dr. Nyaba, look, we keep talking about these problems. We keep saying government must do this, government must do that. Isn't there anything that, as individuals, you can actually do, as an association, you can actually do to increase production? You could do to ensure that we are able to reduce the surge in inflation?
Yeah, Wilson, I think already we are doing a lot. As we speak, if I were to say videos of some districts in northern Ghana where we are currently selling fertilizer to farmers on input credit, it will marvel you. We have an arrangement with Yara Fertilizer Company Limited, where we are taking some fertilizers and distributing to farmers. I have some partnership with seed importers, where I took good quantities of seeds on credit and also supply to the farmers on input credit. We are doing our own block farms in almost all the 5 northern regions as we speak, where we are promoting plowing, we are promoting the supply of seeds for them to plant, we are promoting the supply of fertilizers, and we are thinking that these interventions that we are doing is going to go a long way to actually reduce our dependence on importation. We have a program with other companies like Guinness Ghana Brewery Limited, and then through that intervention, Guinness Ghana, who used to import raw material for producing of the various type of beverages, they are completely stopped, and they are working closely with us, and we are empowering farmers and supporting them with inputs to actually produce. We have partnership with SARI. So this year we have engaged a number of seed growers who are growing the seed locally. And we are hoping that if those things are done, it will help to reduce our dependence on importation. But as my colleague Morrison said, this alone is not enough. How far can we go? We have over 3 million smallholder farmers. And then with what we are doing, it's not even covering 20%. Okay? So we expect to see policies from government that creates enabling environment so that the things we are doing, other private investors will also come in to do the same thing. We are focusing on only 5 northern Ghana. What about the other 13 or other 11 regions? What is happening there? We have farmers there who are struggling. They don't know what to do. Prices of inputs are so high. Apart from that, we have also come to observe that the banks are not also helping. Last week, we have a number of poultry farmers from Doma and Techima who came to Accra. I led them. We visited a number of banks. I don't want to mention names. We started the engagement. It got a point, the kind of collateral that they're looking for to be able to disburse loans to these people. I mean, as we speak, they are thinking of actually withdrawing. Okay, so getting credit facilities, even on your own from banks, is still another problem. So we have been talking to the ministry. When the new minister came with the credit guarantee system to replace the fertilizer subsidy program, I think we welcome it. But we are thinking that it's delayed. Whilst we are not calling for government to give us free things, we were expecting that now that we are planting and then we need money to actually maintain the farms, at least that program would have been rolled out so that we'll be able to do that. If you don't do that, by the time it will come on board, production is already over. So even if you take the facility, you'll be able to produce for next year. So what we are complaining today with 2024 with the same complaints. It's not that the private sector are not doing their best. It's not that farmers are just waiting and complaining and waiting for government to always come to their aid. We are doing what we can do. But there are certain critical areas that we expect that government should take those areas to actually help us to work well. Now, we complain about issue of 4 irrigation facilities across the country. After the failed One Village, One Dam project, we made a number of proposals to government. But we traced the budget for the past 3 years. We realized that there is no any budget allocation to irrigation development.
What were those proposals you made to government after the failure of the One Village, One Dam?
Yeah, some of the proposals we made was, given the critical nature of irrigation to agricultural development in Ghana, we need to increase investment in irrigation development.
Okay.
But the One Village, One Dam concept was not properly implemented. So what we said was that instead of doing dam in every village, government should try to consolidate the funding. Even if you do one big dam in a district, then the following year, you go to another district, you do another big dam. The following year, you go to another district, you do another big dam. With time, you see the number of dams that will pop up. And now the dams that we are relying on, which are meaningful dams that farmers are using for irrigation purpose, are those dams that were constructed by Achampon's regime. You can talk of the Tono, you can talk of the Pong, or many of them. They are the meaningful dams that we currently have. But much have not been done in that area. Under the Economic Angle Project, which was actually spearheaded by the finance minister, I think it's a very good project. Currently, a number of good dams are being created, a number of canals, and then farms are being prepared. But the project is limited in scope. At the moment, we are still doing, let's say, 3 regions, Greater Accra, Oti, and Volta. And even in those areas that we have these projects are limited because how many farmers can go there. And we expect that there will be speedy release of funding so that this project will also scale up to other areas. That will go a long way to address issue of irrigation, issue of lack of proper farming areas for seed production, lack of infrastructure for processing and then storage. So all these are things that we are hoping will be done. But notwithstanding, I'm told there's a lot of consultation going on for the mid-year budget, and that most of these concerns that we are raising will be captured.
Great. Let me bring in, Anthony Morrison. I mean, you've talked about a lot of consultations going on, but Anthony Morrison, based on our current situation, you think there is hope?
Oh, yeah, certainly as a country, we need to survive. And the only means to survival is to eat nutritious foods. I would say that the private sector is always ready to invest into the industry once they see the green light from government, taking steps to mitigate importation of unnecessary produce and inputs. I would also want to add to the fact that as a country, we are failed to take into consideration several issues that happens at the global level, which has the tendency to influence our food production and food systems. And these are some of the things the Chamber of Agribusiness have been highlighting over the past years to government to take a look. For instance, when we look at how prepared are we for emergencies, and have we put in place emergency agriculture strategies that will forestall issues of food insecurity. Some of these things are very important. You look at the time the COVID came and how we were all rushing for food. Aside the COVID, the food prices jumped and several other issues, and also the Russian-Ukraine war and its impact on access to fertilizers and other agro inputs. So we have actually been doing a lot. Charles have said few of them. We have actually put in more than 12 major agro companies, some from Morocco, some from Egypt, some from Canada, to come into the country and to provide several of our players some support. We have also engaged several of financial institutions from outside who are ready and already providing mechanization credits and machinery credits and several other forms of technical support to our farmers. And not only limited to that, we are also looking at post-harvest challenges, especially in the areas of cassava. But a lot depends on how committed government is, because the only way we can move this is to make sure that government is ready to dance along or walk along with us. As far as the private sector is ready to continue to deepen the engagement level, government must also be ready to take some of the consultative advice that comes from the private sector. We have engaged with the new minister. A lot has been said and a lot we know is being put in place. But as we stand now, the production season for major season has started. Farmers have not been supported yet, and we do not know when this support is going to come. For us, we have said that subsidies for the sector is not what will grow the sector, but what is needed is pragmatic policies that will actually influence on the food production and also post-harvest. We have also stated clearly that as a country, the agriculture sector skills is very low. However, if you go to some of the major companies in the country, most of the top skills are all imported. And there is a lot to be done to strengthen the agriculture colleges around the country. There is a lot to be done to deepen agriculture technical vocational skills penetration, especially among the unemployed youth that we see on the streets on a daily basis. If you go to the 5 northern regions, you can count more than 600 tractors, some of which are just as old as 6 months, lying idle. These are opportunities for us to train a lot of youth to be able to service and provide mechanization services for some of the farmers for them to be able to produce a lot for us. So there is a lot to be done when it comes to the areas of agro-processing. A lot has to be done. Our shea butter, top-notch, our honey. In fact, Ghana's honey has been banned. The Chamber of Agribusiness, working closely with GIZ, FAO, EU, UK, and Veterinary Services and the Animal Livestock Division are working closely to see how we can make our honey fit for export once more. And a lot is being done that if I want to continue, time will not take us. But let me also add to the fact that we need to look at how we can align some of these structures. It's not that we need to create more of the government quangos like Poultry Council or Development Authority or this. No, government has little to spend on the agriculture sector. The more you create all these quangos, the more budgetary allocation for this are going to be very limited. We need to merge some of these agencies of government to make sure that they have what it takes. For instance, if you go to PPRSD, the Plant Regulatory Services Department of MOFA, they need a lot of support. However, this is the biggest arm of MOFA, bringing in a lot of IPF. They seriously need to upgrade the role of PPRSD to become probably the only regulatory body for the agriculture sector.
Can you hold on for me a minute? I mean, let me just bring in Charles Nyaba. This one. We need to be wrapping up. Charles Nyaba, listening to Anthony Morrison, he makes the point that the farming season has started, but not a lot has been done. So does that mean that the problems that we're facing today, because we didn't do much last year, we're going to be facing the same problem next year because we haven't done much this year? Dr. Charles Nyaba, can you hear me? Can you unmute your microphone so we can hear you, Dr. Charles Nyaba?
Yeah. Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I can say there's a hope for this year because the season started on a very good note. Even though we got limited support from government in terms of input subsidy, in terms of subsidy for seed and fertilizer, but my last 2 weeks visit to most of the farms shows that the crops were looking good. There are many other private investors who actually went to the sector. If you go to our major rice growing areas, which is in northeast, around Yagaba, Umbisi valleys, Kolembilisi, so all those areas, it will amaze you the number of big investors who went there, of which politicians are actually constituting over 50%, especially our friends from the NDC side.
Okay.
I want to say that it's good to be in opposition because they have come to realize that going to invest in farming makes sense.
Okay.
I can mention a big number of MPs who have created over thousands of acres. They are developing the lands on their own. There are other foreign investors who actually came there and they are carrying smallholder farmers alongside.
Okay.
We ourselves have also scaled up most of our production in terms of maize, in terms of soya beans, in terms of sorghum, in terms of rice. Our members alone have increased their production more than 30%. And the other good news is that last year, because farmers were hoping for fertilizer subsidy from government, which never came, and they moved into soya cashew production, the price for cashew this year was not good for them. So I went to most of the cashew growing areas and I saw a good number of farmers who moved into maize production again. So that means that our supply is likely to increase. If you also take the rainfall pattern, last year it actually impacted on the farms a lot because the drought was long. Around 27th to first week of October, there was serious flooding, which also affected most of the farms. As we speak, even though there was a little break, on the first week of July, that was last week, but this week, as I spoke to most of the farmers from the various districts, it was raining the whole day today. So the raining pattern so far so good. So if that continues, it will also help. Our main hope now is on the minister. The new minister has promised us that as we are struggling on our own and planting, they are coming out with a package which will help us to further support the farmers. So we are still waiting for that package, and I'm hopeful that if he's listening to this conversation, we will speed up with whatever package he has for farmers, because we are waiting for him, and then we'll be able to improve our supply over last year.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Charles Nyaba, who's Executive Director, Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana, and to you, Anthony Morrison, who's CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness, for joining us here on Upfront on the Joy News channel. My name is Winston Amoah. On behalf of the team, thank you very much for watching. Coming up is Joy News Prime.